The Middle East on edge for an expected Iranian strike on Israel.
There are definitely concerns of something bigger, and both Iran and Hezbollah have said that they're planning something much bigger.
Plus, Ukraine's forces continue their largest launch of an incursion into Russia's territory since the war started in 2022.
Ukraine's raid into Russia caught Moscow unaware and was an embarrassment to Russian military leaders who have scrambled to contain the breach.
And the Olympics officially close in Paris as the torch passes on to Los Angeles.
Hollywood was represented with Tom Cruise performing a stunt worthy of Mission Impossible.
Today is Monday, August 12th. And this is VOA's Flashpoint. Good evening, I'm Lori London. Germany, France, and Britain called early Monday for a Gaza ceasefire while Israel braced for a large-scale attack. The urgent push for a truce comes amid fears of a wider regional conflict with Iran and its proxies, as ceasefire talks are also set to resume on Thursday. Linda Gradstein joins us now for an update from Jerusalem.
What is the mood there right now on the ground, and how are people reacting, and what are they anticipating?
Well, I think people are definitely nervous. I mean, what happened is that last week, everybody was waiting for an attack. On July 31st, the Hamas leader Ismail Haniyeh was assassinated in Tehran. And at the same time, Israel also took responsibility for an assassination of a senior Hezbollah leader. So everybody was kind of on pins and needles waiting. And people would say, oh, well, I'll meet you for coffee if there's no attack. And people were definitely nervous. The Israeli, what they call the Home Front Command, which is the government, has this new system in which if there's an alert in your area, you will get a text message with a siren directly to your cell phone. And so what they're trying to do is not have the entire country be affected if there's some sort of a response. And then the situation calmed down. And things went back to normal and everything kind of passed. And now, as of today, they're saying again that they now expect there to be a retaliation in the next 48 hours.
U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin Sunday was beefing up security, sending more resources, a submarine, U.S.
Yes.
It came with a sense of urgency. Are there also concerns there that there could be a wider regional war, that this wouldn't be just some strike in retaliation, just sort of a symbolic, or are there more concerns of something bigger this time?
No, there are definitely concerns of something bigger, and both Iran and Hezbollah have said that they're planning something much bigger. In April, for the first time, Iran directly attacked Israel, something like 300 rockets and missiles, almost all of which were shot down by both Israel, the United States, the Jordanians. But now they're sort of expecting something much larger, a possibility that an attack could come on Israelis abroad. So, for example, the Air Force just said that anybody in Georgia or Azerbaijan who works for the Air Force should leave immediately. Azerbaijan shares a border with Iran, so there's definitely an increase, and there is a concern. Look, the idea is that Hezbollah has said, and Iran has said, and Israel, nobody wants a war, but it's possible that it could easily kind of turn into that. Israel's also considering a preemptive strike on Hezbollah, and people are definitely nervous. At the same time, the government has not changed its rules for Israeli civilians. And usually if there's an expectation of an imminent attack, especially, for example, from Hezbollah in the north, it would say that Israelis should stay very close to their bomb shelters. Everybody, by the way, either has a bomb shelter in their apartment that's used as an extra bedroom, what's called a safe room, or in their building. And they definitely have been, telling people to open them, and people have been stocking up on water and food and things like that. But there really is not a sense of panic. There's not a sense of, oh my God, what do I do? But people are nervous.
And we have potentially renewed ceasefire hostage release talks coming up this Thursday amid all of this. Do you feel like the tensions and the threat of an attack is going to push that forward, or are people feeling skeptical that anything can really come out of it at this point?
Well, these are being called sort of last-ditch talks that, if they don't get an agreement soon, there won't be an agreement. But again, that's a lot of posturing. Originally, I think the thought was that Iran would hold off until after the attacks until after these talks to see if anything was going to come out of it. And that, for some reason, has changed in the last 24 hours. But I think the two really aren't all that connected. There is a deal on the table. It's the deal that President Biden has been talking about that he says is an Israeli proposal. The Israeli press reports say that what has changed is that the new leader of Hamas, he was always the leader of the military wing. He's now the leader of the political wing as well, Yahya Sinwar, who's believed to be hiding in a tunnel underground Gaza somewhere, that he wants a deal, that there's a sense that, he will get a better deal now than perhaps he could have gotten before, and that, the population in Gaza, with a growing humanitarian crisis, with the number of deaths approaching 40,000, he's concerned they could turn on Hamas, so that he wants a deal. The question is whether Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu wants a deal. And in the last couple of weeks, we've had reports from various generals saying that Netanyahu is the one who's holding up the deal.
And I know there's a lot of consternation in that regard with the hostage families in particular. Would you say that there's a major division going on between not only the Israeli government, the Netanyahu government, and also the citizens who want these people brought home?
Yeah, look, polls have consistently shown that the Israeli public favors a deal that would bring these hostages home. I've mentioned this on the program several times. I'm friendly with one of the hostage families. Their son, Hirsch Goldberg Poland, who's also an American citizen, grew up with one of my sons, and Rachel and John have been absolutely tireless in advocating for a deal and for Hirsch's release and the release of all of the hostages. And I think there is a growing sense that Netanyahu is making decisions based on his own political situation rather than what really is best for the country. Now, some people and Netanyahu's supporters say that it is the military pressure that has led Hamas to soften its stand, and that Hamas has now agreed, for example, that Israel doesn't have to agree to end the war, that there will be a 6-week ceasefire, something like 30 hostages will be released, and then during that 6 weeks, they will negotiate a longer ceasefire. But at the same time, there does seem to be that Netanyahu is imposing new conditions each time, and the right wing of his government has said that if he agrees to a hostage deal, they might pull out of the government, bringing down the government and causing new elections. So there definitely is a growing rift, and it's coming after 10 months of war when Israelis were very united and very much in favor of the war. And, more than 300,000 soldiers were called up for reserve duty. Now, some of those soldiers are on their second or third rounds of reserve duty. They have families, they have businesses. So there's a sense, I think, that Israelis want the hostages home, they want the war to end, and they just sort of want to move forward.
Linda Gradstein in Jerusalem, thanks so much for the update. Meanwhile, Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant said Monday that he spoke with U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin to prepare for a possible large-scale military attack on Israel. Austin said the United States would take every possible step to defend Israel. The U.S. military presence has been beefing up in recent days amid concerns of retaliatory strikes on Israel. Ukraine's president has now acknowledged Ukrainian action on Russian soil. Its forces rammed through the Russian border last Tuesday and swept across western parts of Russia's Kursk region. AP correspondent Karen Shamus has details.
President Vladimir Zelensky has broken the government's silence on a surprise Ukrainian military incursion into Russia's Kursk border region. In a video address, Zelensky indirectly acknowledged the ongoing military actions. He said the commander of Ukraine's armed forces had sent him multiple reports about the frontline situation and what he called our actions to push the war out into the aggressor's territory. Ukraine's raid into Russia caught Moscow unaware and was an embarrassment to Russian military leaders who have scrambled to contain the breach. I'm Karen Shamas.
Meanwhile, Russian President Vladimir Putin on Monday said Ukraine's incursion was an attempt to stop Moscow's eastern offensive and a tactic to gain leverage in future peace talks. While more than 100,000 civilians have been forced to flee as almost a week of fierce fighting continues, Putin insisted Russia's army will prevail and remained defiant, saying the military is moving forward with its eastern offensive. For more on the situation, we hear from Anna Chernikova in Kyiv.
Experts of the Institute for the Study of War report that the offensive of Ukrainian troops in Russia's Kursk region allowed the Ukrainian forces to at least temporarily seize the initiative on one part of the front and continue the confrontation on the entire territory of hostilities. Analysts note that Russia's possession of the initiative throughout the hostilities since November 2023 allowed it to determine the place, time, scale, and requirements for conducting hostilities in Ukraine, and forced Ukraine to spend material and human resources on reactive defense operations. Geolocation surveys, as well as Russian and Ukrainian reports, indicate that Ukrainian forces have advanced west and northwest in the Kursk region. While Russian sources claim its troops have stabilized the situation, in a meeting convened by President Vladimir Putin, authorities said 28 settlements of the Kursk region are under control of the Ukrainian armed forces. In the meantime, aerial photographs appeared to show Ukrainian tanks being used in battles on the territory of Russia. Also, Forbes reported that Ukrainian troops are digging trenches in the Kursk region of Russia, calling it a sign that they plan to stay there. Meanwhile, the Russian authorities of the Belgorod region reported that Ukrainian forces are advancing in the Belgorod region as well. On the morning of August 12th, the governor of the Belgorod region announced the beginning of the evacuation of the population of the border Krasnoyarsk region. And in another major development, heavy smoke was seen above the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant on Sunday, as President Volodymyr Zelensky reported that Ukraine reported a fire at the site of the facility. There were no reports of excess in levels of radiation emissions. As a result of the fire, damage to the cooling tower and other technological equipment is possible. Anna Chernikova, VOA News.
At the beginning of 2024, according to the Kyiv School of Economics, the war in Ukraine had inflicted over $150 billion of damage on Ukraine's infrastructure. But some scholars in the U.S., alongside Ukrainian anti-corruption activists, are looking ahead to the end of the war and the opportunity to rebuild. Princeton University recently created a legal database to help with that effort. Lulia Larmolenko has the story narrated by Anna Rice.
In June, Princeton's Innovation for Successful Societies program launched a detailed database of Ukrainian reconstruction laws. ISS Director Jennifer Widener says the database makes it easier for companies to navigate Ukraine's legislative landscape, which can be confusing, and to do business in Ukraine.
I think it will help private companies decide to participate more easily than they might, because they'll know what the legal position is, the legal vulnerabilities and the legal opportunities are.
The Coalition for Integrity, a nonprofit anti-corruption group, oversaw the work. The group says the goal is to remove any potential obstacles caused by Ukraine's complicated and ever-changing legal landscape. President Wars McMurray says the database will make it easier for Western companies thinking about investing in Ukraine.
It is intended to be used by the private sector and the public sector, wherever they are, not just U.S. companies, to facilitate the rebuilding of Ukraine.
This database is just part of a larger project that started in 2022, when Ukrainian anti-corruption expert Oksana Nesterenko came to Princeton as a guest researcher. She and Widener started working together on innovative ways to rebuild Ukraine in a transparent way. And Nesterenko says they also started training people in Ukraine to help.
The main idea is to have more people in Ukraine who work in the field of reducing corruption risks and passing the idea along to their immediate leadership.
Widener says every crisis creates unprecedented opportunities for development and success in the future. She is convinced that in a decade's time, Ukraine's experience can serve as an example of handling a post-war crisis. Yulia Yarmolenko, VOA News, Washington.
The race for the White House is heating up with less than 3 months to go until voters decide on who will be the next U.S. president. Immigration is one of the top issues in the upcoming election. Vice President Kamala Harris is campaigning on her achievements as a prosecutor, while former President Donald Trump blasts the current administration's record and promises mass deportations of undocumented immigrants. VOA's immigration reporter Alini Barros has more.
On the campaign trail, Vice President Kamala Harris highlights her background as a prosecutor, district attorney, and California Attorney General.
I walked underground tunnels between the United States and Mexico on that border with law enforcement officers. I went after transnational gangs, drug cartels, and human traffickers that came into our country illegally. I prosecuted them in case after case, and I won.
While in office, former President Donald Trump built more than 50 miles of new border wall, reduced the annual cap on refugee admissions to historic lows, and enforced a policy that separated children from their parents.
This November, the American people are going to compare these records, and they're going to tell Border Czar Harris, you have done a horrible job. You're a disgrace to our country. You're fired. Get out of here. You're fired. Get out.
Immigration is a hot issue in this presidential election. A Chicago Council survey found that 50% of respondents say a large number of immigrants is a threat to the United States, though just over half of Americans support a border wall and the use of American troops at the U.S.-Mexico border. Most oppose mass deportation of undocumented immigrants. With Congress failing to pass immigration reform, the nation remains dependent on executive actions and regulations, regardless of who is in office.
With the political environment we're in, it's a tough place because executive actions are always going to be the subjects of lawsuits, and we have a Congress that's not willing to act.
Harris pledges to support border security legislation, highlighting Trump's role in sinking a bipartisan Senate bill earlier this year.
He tanked the bipartisan deal because he thought it would help him win an election. Which goes to show Donald Trump does not care about border security. He only cares about himself. So here is my pledge to you. As president, I will bring back the border security bill that Donald Trump killed, and I will sign it into law.
Trump's Republican allies have urged him to focus on areas where they believe he has an advantage over Harris, especially on immigration. He continues to call for the deportation of undocumented migrants and criticizes the Biden-Harris administration for having what he calls an open border policy.
With your vote, inflation will stop. The illegal aliens will be turned back. They're not coming in. We got to stop them. Did you see where she's now saying, oh, we had a very good border. Oh, great. They had the worst border in the history of the world.
The U.S. Border Patrol logged about 130,000 migrant encounters in June, up from about 104,000 in the same month of 2019, Trump's last year before the pandemic, but down from the December 2023 peak of more than 300,000. Alini Barros, VOA News, Washington.
Hundreds of residents fled their homes on Sunday as a major wildfire raging out of control outside of Athens, fueled by hot, windy weather, burned trees, houses, and cars, and sent smoke clouds over the Greek capital. Reuters correspondent Olivia Zellino brings us this report.
Residents of the Greek town of Donbas fled their homes on Sunday as hundreds of firefighters battled a fast-moving wildfire just outside Athens. The blaze, about 20 miles north of Greece's capital, is being fueled by hot and windy weather. This resident says the fire, quote, started from one point and suddenly the whole village was surrounded. Thick clouds of smoke could be seen drifting over the tourist hotspot. A fire brigade spokesperson said flames were reaching as much as 25 meters high, swallowing up trees. Evacuation alerts are in place for 9 areas near Varnavas. Several other regions across Greece are on high alert for fire risk. Authorities have called for emergency measures involving the army, police, and volunteers to deal with forest fires until August 15. Hundreds of wildfires have broken out across Greece since May. Scientists attribute their frequency and intensity to the increasingly hot and dry weather conditions linked to climate change. After its warmest winter on record and long periods of little or no rainfall, Greece also registered its hottest June and July. It is expected to record its hottest ever summer this year.
That was Reuters correspondent Olivia Zellino. You're listening to Flashpoint on the Voice of America. I'm Lori London in Washington. Tanzanian police said Monday they've arrested senior leaders from the main opposition party Chadema, as well as hundreds of its supporters. Reuters correspondent David Doyle has more.
Those arrests came hours after police banned a conference planned by the youth wing, saying the event was likely to breach the peace. Police said the party's youth leaders intended to influence young people to demonstrate in Mbeya, a city in Tanzania's southwest. A Chadema spokesperson denied this, saying the event was to celebrate International Youth Day with top party officials, including Mbowe, set to address the youth. The spokesperson said more than 400 people had been arrested by police. The spokesperson also said that a day earlier, Vice Chairman Tundu Lissu and Secretary General John Manyika had been arrested. A police spokesperson did not respond to requests for comment. Since coming to power in March 2021, Tanzania's President Samia Suluhu Hassan has lifted a ban on political rallies and relaxed restrictions on media. However, she has faced criticism from opposition parties and rights groups for arrests last year of those planning protests against a port management deal.
That was David Doyle with Reuters reporting. And finally today, movie star Tom Cruise rappelled from the roof of France's national stadium and received the Olympic flag, bringing a heavy dose of Hollywood to the closing ceremony of the Paris Games as the French capital handed over the torch to the next host, Los Angeles.
It was so well put together, and it encompassed the spirit of the games, the athletes, and it was just my daughter and myself. We were in tears several times as we watched this show, and the climax with Tom Cruise was fantastic.
We hear more from Chris Dignam with Reuters.
The closing ceremony included performances by Billie Eilish, Red Hot Chili Peppers, and Snoop Dogg, all music icons from California, in a nod to the next Summer Games host city of Los Angeles. Hollywood was also represented, with Tom Cruise performing a stunt worthy of Mission Impossible. LA Mayor Karen Bass became the first black woman mayor to receive the Olympic flag. She acknowledged Paris had set the bar high, but expressed confidence that her city would prove itself a worthy successor. Thousands of Olympic fans celebrated outside the Stade de France before the 2.5-hour show. It also featured an insect-like golden Voyager who passed through a dystopian future where the Olympics have vanished and must be rediscovered. The finale concludes 2 weeks of sporting drama that saw the United States and China duke it out for the top spot in the medal table, right down to the last event. The American women's basketball team on Sunday handed France a gut-wrenching 1-point defeat to earn a 40th gold medal, tying China's total. But the United States finished with the highest medal count overall, topping China by more than 30 silver and bronze medals.
That was Chris Dignam with Reuters reporting. And that does it for today's program, but there is more VOA coverage 24 hours a day on our website, voanews.com, and across our social media platforms. On behalf of everyone here at VOA, thank you very much for listening. Until tomorrow, I'm Lori London.
For deeper dives and expert analysis, listen to VOA Podcasts. Issues in the News explores the biggest stories every weekend, while International Edition keeps you informed every weekday. Plus, with the 5-minute newscast at the top of every hour, you're always up to date.